All right, well, good evening, everyone. I guess we should go ahead and get started. I know it's 7 o'clock. And to welcome everyone. This is our first in-person meeting of the Charter Revision Commission, and it's nice to actually meet everyone in person versus in our little squares on the computer screen. All right, so I guess calling the meeting to order. I guess the first item on our agenda, everyone should have a copy of the agenda in front of you. We'd like to go ahead and approve our agenda this evening. Obviously, it's a pretty, I think, straightforward agenda. We're going to have a redistricting discussion with the Office of Law. We're going to have a map discussion. For other business, I guess there are a couple items I would just like to touch on. One that is to confirm our calendar going forward. And as you know, Laura sent out a link to the public testimony page, so we can talk about that in the other business. But everyone okay with the agenda as it appears here? All right, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So.
All right, I guess that was Tom, and then the second. Yep. Second from David. Awesome. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Great. Thank you. All right, and then I see our minutes were sent out to everyone. Hopefully, everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting, which was November 12th. Any changes or comments on the minutes? Do you see them? All right, then can I get a motion to approve our minutes? Move from David, a second. Second, Tom. All right, great. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, great. Thank you. All right, that takes care of our administrative items for this evening. I know, Laura, I think you had some more housekeeping items you'd like to share with us before we get started.
Sure. I just wanted to explain to everybody a little bit about what's going on with our dais up there. The chambers is a little bit under construction in terms of the technology in the chambers. That's why you see the blue wires up there. The microphones are for your use, but they're also necessary in order for us to capture what you say this evening. So if you gently touch the little icon, your microphone, the red light will turn on. You should be able to speak into it. It's best if you turn it off when you're done, so that we don't have any kind of interference. But yeah, that'll help us capture everything that you say tonight nice and clearly. If you had just a moment, I wanted to just kind of talk about the binder real quick. We put some information in it for you. It is for your use, obviously. I would, if you want to reorganize it, we put 8 tabs in there for you. If you would like more tabs, if you'd like something different to help you out, just let us know and we'll get that for you. What we're going to do going forward is we will give you materials that get added as we go along with the holes in them so that you can add them to the binder as you would like. If you want any assistance, again, with organizing those or putting them back together, you can just let me or you can let Anna here know. And by the way, I did not properly introduce some of the people that are here this evening who you have not met in person. Anna McCauley is here to be your official reporter. We have Linda Schuett as well, and the OPZ team. We have somebody, Kelly here from the law office. I'll let everybody introduce themselves personally as well. So that's pretty much it. In the binder, there's some stuff that is responsive to questions that you asked or information you requested at the last meeting. In particular, the 2013 redistricting bills. There's the one that passed, and then that's 1413, and then 3913 is the one that was that came in afterwards and did the kind of cleanup that we talked about after the Board of Elections did some reconciliation with the maps. So that is in there for you. Also responsive to one of the questions that was asked, I think it was Mr. Fleckenstein, kind of this grid that shows election years compared to when a Charter Review Commission came together compared to when a redistricting bill or bills were done. So I just wanted to give you that layout. If you'd like to see specific pieces of legislation that are in the parentheses, I'm happy to pull that for you. If you have any questions about the legalities of it, of course, we have a couple of attorneys here that can help out with that at some point in time. So that's about it. I'm sorry, last point, and I actually failed myself here to identify and introduce yourself every time you talk. It will help with the minutes. It will help for anybody that's watching and listening to know who they're hearing from. So my name is Laura Corby. I am the Administrative Officer to the County Council.
Great, thank you, Laura. All right, does anyone have any questions about anything in our binders? the chart that's been pulled together. Yeah, the chart was a separate document. It's underneath your binder on the far side. Okay, great. Okay. All right, so seeing no comments on the binder of that, why don't we then just jump into our first agenda item. We're going to have a redistricting discussion with the Office of Law, and I believe you guys are going to be covering some of the general legal, redistricting in general, kind of an overview, and also some of the legal requirements that we need to be aware of as we go into this discussion. And Kelly, I think that was going to be right. Okay, great. Thanks, Kelly.
Doesn't move. These are really constrained. All right, I'm Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney. Nice to meet everybody in person. We'll have a couple different representatives from the Office of Law who will be at your meetings. It'll either be I or Lori Blair Klassmeyer, the Deputy County Attorney, who I think has been at your last few meetings, but she's in Disney right now, so she sent me to come here tonight. I was going to talk briefly about the Open Meetings Act, or see if anybody had any questions about that. I do believe that Laura told me you had a little discussion about that during your very first meeting, so I'm not sure whether you need any other details on that, but there is in the binder, if your binder is the same as mine, there's the memo from Linda Schuett right on the top there about the Open Meetings Act. That covers the basics of the Open Meetings Act. I mean, obviously, you all as an appointed commission by the County Council are subject to the Open Meetings Act, and that is what we're having here tonight, which anytime that you meet together as a quorum, you are subject to that Open Meetings Act, and it has to be open to the public, and it has to be advertised ahead of time, and an agenda has to be published. And Laura, I believe, is taking care of all that, so your agendas will be on the county website, and they'll be available for everybody to see ahead of time. Really the only other things that you have to be aware of for the Open Meetings Act, which are taking care of themselves with having your minute taker here, are that minutes have to be taken for any open meeting. They have to be available to the public as well. Those minutes have to reflect any motions that are made, what the votes are on those motions, and things of that nature. If you look through the binder and see some of the stuff that happened in the past, you can see good examples of those minutes as well. I think that these are all being recorded as well, right? So that also constitutes the minutes, and those can be made available for the public to comply with the Open Meetings Act as well. Does anybody have any questions about that? Since you talked about that before, I'm not going to get into the details of it. It's all in the memo.
Okay.
All right.
I guess just one real quick.
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't think, I know there's Open Meetings Act training, or we don't need to do that, do we? Is that a requirement for us to do? I know we have the ethics link that you sent.
There is, that is a good question, because there is Open Meetings Act training. I need to look and refresh my memory on what the requirements are on that, because there are certain, I think that at least one person on the body has to take the training, but I'll look into that and let you know for sure.
Okay.
And I think you can do that on the state website, on the Open Meetings Act Compliance Board website. I think there's a link to that training.
Yeah.
But I'll double check and see, and I can email somebody and they can let you know whether you need to do that, click on that or not.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Stephen Waddy, I'm sorry. I was wondering about, since our vice chair, I think, is coming on his way, whether or not that affects the Open Meetings Act in terms of him not being here.
No, you still have a quorum. As long as you have 4 or more, you have a quorum.
Okay.
So it doesn't affect anything. You can still continue on.
Okay, thank you.
If you had 3 people here, technically you wouldn't be subject to the Open Meetings Act. But as long as you have a quorum, you're subject to it.
I understand. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. No, I can't see through the glass over there to even see if he is there.
It is that line
I know,
right
it's like
through
cutting right in the middle.
of your face. Okay.
Okay, moving on to the Charter Commission as a whole, and focusing really on the redistricting, because I know that that's the first thing that everybody wants to look at. And forgive me if you've heard some of this before. I wasn't sure what was presented to you the last time, and I think you already know what your role is, but I just wanted to talk very briefly about the commission and the advisory position that they are in. They are acting in an advisory capacity, making recommendations to the county council, as you know, both on charter revisions and on redistricting. So of course the charter amendments are going to be, sounds like the second thing that you'll take on. But just with regard to those, when the commission makes those recommendations to the county council, those, will be taken under advisement by the council, and then if the council is to move forward with any of those charter changes, they would have to go before the council by way of resolution, which would have to be passed by the county council by a vote of at least 5. And then if those charter revisions are approved by the council by a vote of 5, then they go on the ballot in the fall or whenever the next election is. It may not be this coming fall because they do have to go down to the election board by August. So that's how a charter revision would be made. Now, redistricting is similar but a little bit different. That is also a recommendation that would be made by the commission to the county council as set forth in the charter. And that also needs a vote of 5 by the county council to approve any redistricting. That does not have to go on the ballot. It is subject to referendum, but it is not something that needs to go on the ballot. If you look through, I spent some time today looking at the county council, or the recommendation from 2011. That gives you a really good overview of what the last commission did with regard to redistricting. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, I do recommend that you flip through both the report that was given to the county council and then the minutes leading up to that report, because I found it really enlightening to kind of see how they went through the process, what was discussed at the various different meetings, and then ultimately what turned out to be reported to the county council. The other thing that I found helpful, and I would recommend taking a look at when you get a chance if you haven't already, is the Citizen's Guide to Redistricting. I think Laura sent you that link. That was published by, I can't remember, it was a law school. Cornell, right. I knew it was one of the good ones. But it was very, very helpful. It gives a really broad overview of redistricting around the U.S., goes into a lot more detail than probably any of us will ever need to know, but it was very, very helpful, I thought, to take a look at what your role is and what the types of things that you'd be looking at are. We talked a little bit on Friday, and if you have any questions, we can talk a little bit more about that, about the timing. And I'm not going to go over everything that we talked about last time. But again, as we talked about
I'm sorry, 1 second.
Sure.
Is it possible we can get the written timeline for what you stated about when the charter provisions need to be submitted? You said by August for the charter specific provisions, but if we could just have like
a timeline for, right.
Yeah, visual. I need something visual to see.
Right. No, I understand that. We can certainly prepare that for you. So there's a couple different timelines that you all will be operating under. The charter as a whole requires your report to go to the council within 1 year of your appointment. So I don't know the exact date you were appointed, October, whatever that date is, your report has to go to the county council within 12 months of that date. So ultimately you have up to 12 months to submit your whole report to the council, which could include your recommendations on redistricting as well as any charter revisions. But it looks as it's been done in the past that there's generally been 2 separate reports. It looks like the redistricting report has been done first, submitted to the council first, and then there's a second report with the charter review recommendations. And I'll get you the timing on any, and Laura may know it offhand, what the timing is as far as when a charter amendment has to be ready and passed by the council in order to get onto the ballot for the fall. She looks like she's looking that up now. I know it's sometime in August, and I think it's early August.
Yeah, I know state law changed in the past year or two. It's now like 95 days prior to, it's something 95 days prior to. The way it worked last year is we asked the council to have, they only have 2 meetings a month, the first and third Mondays of the month. So we asked the council to have all of their charter amendment resolutions finalized. I think it was the last meeting in July, because we do have to send, under state law, we have to send the questions that appear on those resolutions. They have to go to the county attorney. He has to certify those, and he has a deadline to get that certification and information to the Board of Elections. So I can tell you easily enough that the final meeting for the council to adopt charter amendment resolutions would be that 2nd July meeting, which is going to be the 3rd Monday in July.
David Kaufman here. I'm trying to connect that information with what this chart shows. So I'm seeing that the Charter Review Commission in 2001 didn't have its final redistricting bill until 2003. And it looks like, and again, I may be reading the chart wrong, it looks like the charter revision in 2011-12 didn't have its first bill in until the February of 13, but I'm trying to reconcile what the 1 year time limit is.
That's me. I can explain this chart a little bit better if that would help. It might be a small tangent here if that's okay with everybody. So this is the kind of a comparison of election years to when a charter review commission came together all the way down to when a redistricting bill would have been introduced, actually, are the dates that are shown with the bill number. So for example, 2002 was an election year. The Charter Review Commission did their work in 2001. That means that within a year of Resolution 1601, they would have presented their report to the council. That would have included the redistricting recommendations and the charter amendment recommendations. And then focusing just on the redistricting portion of things, in November of 2001 is when the first redistricting bill would have been introduced by the county council. So we have different things happening here. I can see how this might be confusing. Resolutions are used to appoint the Charter Review or Revision Commission. Resolutions are used to for the council to approve charter amendments, potential charter amendments. But then a bill is done for redistricting. So that's what you see. A resolution that would have appointed a commission initially, and then you see the reference to the redistricting bills that the council would have done. So there's not really any charter amendment resolutions that are a part of this particular chart.
So as I'm looking at, again, I'm trying to put the 1 year, the 1 year deadline that we've got, and we were talking about having a deadline in July. If I'm looking at the 2010 cycle, I'm seeing a 2011, or correct me if I feel like I'm saying it wrong. I'm seeing a 2011 appointment of the commission, but nothing presented until 2013.
For redistricting bills, yeah. I can redo this to include charter amendment resolutions if that would be helpful to you. This was supposed to help kind of paint the picture of how it's been handled in the past because of the election year versus deadlines that we're dealing with in this particular situation. So yeah, I can create something else that shows what charter amendment resolutions were done that year.
That's actually less necessary than I think what Commissioner Waddy was asking, which was just to be able to have a timeline for what we need moving forward.
So yeah, you will have a couple of different overlapping things, I think, and Kenny can certainly speak more to that. But you have the year that you all are given under the charter to complete your work, but then the council has imposed some different deadlines on you in light of the filing deadline in 2022. And then there are some deadlines for the council to finalize their charter amendment resolutions. There are deadlines for the county to get those questions to the Board of Elections so that they may appear on the ballot in November. And Kelly can also pick this up too. I think what happens, and this has happened, is if a charter amendment resolution is done, let's say the council can do charter amendment resolutions anytime they want, first of all. There's no restriction on when they can or cannot do them. So they could do a charter amendment resolution next year in September, right? But they would have missed the deadline to be on the ballot next year. So what would happen is if they adopt that resolution with the 5 votes, it would be held until the next election where there's a ballot, and we would just get it on that ballot. So, and that's happened. I mean, that happened a couple of years ago. So that's kind of how that works. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I can help clarify that. If the question that you had about 1 year, for the record, Kelly Kenny, supervising county attorney, if you look at 2011, where the Charter Review Commission was appointed in 2011, The report of the Charter Commission was made, at least with regard to redistricting, September 6, 2011, which would have been within their year timeframe. But then for whatever reason, and I don't know whether we would even know or why this happened, but the council itself didn't take up a bill to redistrict until 2013. So again, when they get that report, it's their prerogative and their decision if and when to take up that redistricting resolution. So that also explains that timeline, which wasn't a fault on the Charter Commission. It was just that with regard to when the county council took action.
Tom Fleckenstein, I have a quick follow-up question. Are we limited to essentially one report with our recommendations, or can we do that over a course of time? In other words, is it possible that there are some things that we could pass and recommend and try to get on the ballot in time to get on the ballot for 2022 in July, and then still have up to a year to work, October of next year to work on other things, or can we only give you one report and recommendation? I see Ms. Shewitt is shaking her head at me, so I think I've answered my own question, possibly.
Let's see what Ms. Shewitt says.
I think you have, the easiest way for me to look at this is you've got 1 year to do everything. That's it. Whatever the council does after that really, is kind of up to them. And I think you can do 2 reports. You can do one on redistricting and one on the charter amendments.
Okay.
So long as you have both of them done within the
year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and so this is Andrea Mansfield, just to clarify.
Linda Shewitt, Legislative Council, just spoke.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've blown that too. Just to make sure I remember correctly, but there is the resolution that the council passed, and I think that in that resolution they were saying, and I know a resolution doesn't have the force of law, it's expressing their intent, but so having the redistricting piece done by the end of December, and then the charter amendments was March timeframe, is that correct? That's what their ideal timeframe as it was laid out?
It's in the front of the bottom.
I know, I was looking, I think I looked right over it.
Yeah, it's the first tab, and I'm sorry, I should have said too, the second tab is the charter itself, the third tab and the fourth tab are the redistricting reports from 2011. But yeah, that resolution 5021, they did request, I think it was, that the first part be done by December 31st and the second part be done by March 31st, 2022.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Larry Telford, just have one more question for one of the, I guess it would be for Laura. I'm looking at your chart again. Going back 20 years to the 2001 Charter Review Commission, it talks about November 2003, Bill 7603. Is that the bill that actually approved the final map of the 7 council districts?
Yes, and so that what happened is there was Bill 9101 was done, something went wrong. Bill 4502 came in and corrected something or fixed something, changed something. And the same thing happened with Bill 7603. It did something to correct Bill 4502, so that Bill 7603 was the final districts.
So if I'm looking at this right, the census came out in technically 2000 or so, but the new council districts weren't really on the ballot till 2006.
If you look at the dates there, you're right, because 2002 would have been an election year, 2006 would have been the next one. So that one is actually kind of caught my curiosity as well.
The situation we're in right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have started pulling all of the documents and working documents for these 3 bills to try and piece that together a little bit.
Is there any issues with the county not having new congressional or new council districts until 2026 if the state has new lines for the delegates for the upcoming election in 2022? Does anyone?
I can answer that.
Is there any issues with that?
Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney. That is one thing that our office did look into, and we did not find that there was any issue with that. There was no requirement that the redistricting occur before the primary election.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Kelly, go ahead.
Okay, I'm just making sure no one else had their lights on. Okay, so let me remember where I was. All right, so I think we understand what the timing is required under the charter. We understand what the county council has asked of you as far as timing, and I think that based on the meeting that we had on Friday, I think everybody's goal is to, move forward with this as expeditiously as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and go through some of the legal parameters with regard to redistricting, and I know that there were some questions that were sent via Laura to find out what the legal requirements are that need to be understood as you undertake this endeavor, and then also whether there was any matters that came up during the 2011 discussions that need to be brought to your attention. With regard to the second question, because that's the easier one, I didn't come across anything. I didn't see that there was any challenges with regard to the redistricting. I can't keep saying that word over and over. With regard to that in 2011, no legal challenges that I saw, and there was nothing that really jumped out at me in looking through the report and the minutes of the discussions in 2011 that jumped out at me as big legal issues that they were looking at that time. Now, with regard to the legal requirements, yes, of course, there are legal requirements that you need to look at, and I think that should be the second. Yes, so the second memo that's in the front of your binder, assuming yours is the same as mine, put together by Linda, goes through the very general summary of what the things are that you need to look at. And again, this kind of comes from the Citizens Guide, kind of condenses it down to a Reader's Digest version of that to go through, what you need to look at. So, I mean, the first and foremost, the whole purpose of redistricting is to look at the population and adjust for the population change with regard to the Councilmanic districts. And I know OPZ will provide you that information in a little bit, so you can see what that is. Now, as set forth in that memo, they have to be substantial equality of population. So the case law that discusses this, you do not have to have 50,000 in District 1 and 50,000 in District 2. We would probably never get down to that. There is a margin of error. It's between 5 to 10% of the population. So you'll see the chart when they pull it up there. That they will look at the population of the county, divide that by 7, figure out whether each district has basically 1/7 of that, and adjust based on that. And that's really what the Charter Commission did the last time. They looked at the population of the different districts. They saw where the changes were, where some districts are higher populated now than others, and kind of looked at those lines to see how to adjust that, because that's really your kind of overarching thing that you're looking at, is adjusting for population to make sure that everybody's vote is equal. If there's, going back to the question that you had about any challenges, there weren't any challenges the last time in 2011. The types of legal issues and the types of challenges that you could, of course, face, is if we didn't redistrict properly, or if it was done for, reasons other than based on population or based on the other criteria that, is set forth for you to take a look at. I mean, obviously, the biggest example of that is gerrymandering, and we kind of all know what that looks like, districts that are all over the place. And that goes to the other points that are on the memo, the contiguity and the compactness. When the courts are looking at districts that are being redrawn, they look at whether they are one continual, blob of land, and not something that kind of goes all over the place or is cut all up, and whether they're kind of compact into, one area.
Kelly, could I stop you for just
Yeah,
a
sure.
second? I think Stephen
wait.
Waddy has a.
I can wait to the end
Sure?
of,
Okay.
yeah.
Go ahead.
finish
All
the-
right, thank you.
Sure, and some other things to take into account, because I know, Mr. Waddy, you had asked, and this may be your question, but you had asked about the communities of interest. Some things that a lot of the case law and a lot of, the documents that talk about redistricting, say that, of course, you can, some of the reasons why the numbers might not be exact is because you're trying to keep those communities of interest or certain areas together and not kind of divide them right up. So, there's all different types of considerations that go into that. I think, but the biggest thing that you want to be aware of is kind of going along with these bullet points are, that it's based on population first and foremost, and then you're kind of looking to see whether it kind of falls within those compactness, contiguity, whether it kind of goes along natural boundaries, bodies of water are considered natural boundaries, mountains, we don't have any mountains here, but, other cases we'll talk about mountains and things like that. And that's how the councilmanic districts are now. I mean, all of them are pieces of land that are contiguous. They're not all over the place, and they're not very, drawn a little bit crazy. Is it Mr. Waddy?
Okay, thank you, Stephen Waddy. I was wondering, in terms of population, is there a particular definition for the population? Are we going by citizen? Are we going by voting age population? Are we going by residents? Is that part of the case law? Or
Yeah, I think the population is the population as a whole, and I believe that's the numbers that you all have been looking at, right? Is the entire population of the county.
Residents, just period. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone is, okay. So the other question I had was, if there's a disparity between, if there's a larger disparity between populations based on, just regular growth, or what you all have told us we're going by, which is residential population. Is there like a compelling reason for allowing larger districts, one larger than another?
I think that there's definitely some case law and some support for, compelling reasons to have a little bit of a disparity. And some of those may be, based on, not kind of cutting up certain communities and things like that. So, the numbers are never going to be exact, but they still have to be within that margin of error, the 5 to no more than 10%, difference between them. But there is some compelling reasons like that. If you had one, like a town center or something like that, you might not want to cut that in half, things of those natures.
So you say it'd be the I guess, boundaries that are, I don't know, how would you describe that previously, in terms of political and geographic boundaries, where you're not cutting up a town center or a neighborhood? That would be what you consider a compelling reason, or what the, Supreme Court, or are we going by state law, local law, or Supreme Court?
A little
that
bit
was
of
another
both.
thing that confused me.
Yeah, a little bit of both. There is a good bit of state law on this, because it looks like every time that the state redistricts, that somebody challenges it. So there's a case about every 10 years on it. So there's a good body of state law on it. So, of course, we would go first by the Maryland Court of Appeals, because that's what's binding here in Maryland. But also there is a whole body of case law, federally. The Supreme Court has looked at, voting and districting, and to make sure. So there's standards that kind of come from both. And the Supreme Court decision would also be binding on Maryland as far as what they speak to, as far as what the guidelines would be.
So, just to kind of wrap up, I guess what I'm trying to understand, if there's been a significant population change, and there's we're going to be judging by the geographical political boundaries. Are there other items that we can use to identify, or that the courts might find acceptable, other than geographic boundaries and political boundaries, to identify a district as one reason or the other being larger than the other. I don't know if that question is.
Right, I mean, I guess that would depend on what the basis is, because I think those are really the population, geographical boundaries, things like that are really the main things that you would be looking at, and the main things that, the courts would be looking at. If there are certain things that the commission wants to look at as far as how they want to set up the districts, I can certainly, look into that question and figure out whether that's something that you could draw a line on.
I'm sorry, I just think of like the previously existing boundaries as being the first aspect of what they'll look at. And then after that, we're going, what after previously existing boundaries, what's the next step in terms of judging whether or not these are they have substantial equality of population. If they vary too much from the current population, current district, then it might be a problem. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, I think that, this is probably easier said than done, but if the districts are all off by a little bit based on the population, you kind of would shift the line a little bit to the left, to the right, up, down, wherever it may be to kind of, adjust the population for the district. And I'm sure that the computer does that. I don't know how they do that, but I'm sure they can play around with the lines to figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yes, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to add to that, Mr. Waddy. I think, I'm not sure this answers your question, but I think one of the primary reasons for allowing a district to be larger, or even, to be larger than it was or larger than other jurisdictions, is to ensure that the minority folks living in a particular area have an ability to actually elect representatives for themselves. And that's a compelling reason that will often offset. As you go through all these, you're going to find it's impossible to meet all of them. One will, it will cover one thing, but you violated the next. But I think that reason is the most compelling reason that a court would accept to vary somewhat from these usual traditional tests.
And I'm sorry, I think I saw your hand back there. And I'm sorry, I don't know.
Just very quickly, Steve Kizigler, Planning and Zoning Officer. I think one of the things to take into account is that, in theory, you could ask a group like my folks, Planning and Zoning, our demographers, and we could draw lines on a map and marry up the population so they're almost exactly equal. That's not an exercise that would ever be acceptable in our political system. So that's why, the founders of this county with a charter, we establish, committees that are going to make recommendations that can take a wide variety of different factors into play. The existing political lines, the social demographic issues. While we don't have mountains, we have rivers and streams. We have a variety of geographic things that influence where people live. So that's why we have these kind of committees to work through those very difficult, challenging issues so that at the end of the day, a very diverse group of people is making a recommendation to the county council on how we should be district.
I appreciate that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. That was a good point too as well. That's all that I had with regard to just the overview on that. If anybody has any more questions, I'm happy to take them. And if you think of anything else, we're happy to look into those as well.
Okay, David?
Yeah, David Kaufman. Is there any case in Anne Arundel County history that you know where the council did not heed the recommendations of the commission substantively?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, I would have to look back in history to see whether that is the case. I know in 2011, the commission made 2 recommendations to the council, and I believe one council member proposed one and another one proposed the other. I don't know. It looks like every time, at least in the ones going back here, there was a bill that culminated in that. So at least back to 1991, there was a bill that was proposed. And if the council didn't take action for whatever reason, they could be subject to legal action for failing to take into account the population and adjust for those changes. But I can certainly go back and see whether there was a time prior to 1991, or whether there were any other challenges to any of the.
Please don't
bills.
expend a great deal of time on that.
Okay.
It would seem like it would have been something that stood out, would have stood out if it had happened.
Just on this standout that was not based on their stuff, it was defeated. This is the one that was passed, and then this corrected.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Corby, Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, was pointing out that the bills in 2013, which I talked about the two bills that were introduced by the two council members, but Ms. Corby has a little bit more background saying that 1313 was not based on a recommendation of the commission. Is that right? And 1413 was based on one of the recommendations. 1313 was defeated. 1413 was the one that passed. And unless I have the numbers backwards, but I think it was 1413 was the one that passed.
I did, I'm sorry, it's Stephen Waddy. I'm not sure, Mr. Kaufman. I have questions for each one of these sections. That's why I wasn't sure whether or not we were going to continue on that with the Office of Law, but I don't know if that's a problem with you all. But in terms of the, I just wanted to say, I think one of the charges that we have is to improve and increase democracy. And I think that democracy is, something that we should value. And in regards to addressing some of these different aspects that you've laid out for us, I think it's important that we express how important they are, as my friend from the OPZ said, in addressing our democratic values. And so that's why, one of the reasons why I asked the question about which type of population we might be looking at, and whether or not, like these lines that we have now, are they based off of population, all the population? Are they based off of voting age population? Are they based off of citizenship population of voting age? How did those, have there been previous maps that have been drawn with a restrictive concept of what a population is for a line of a district in this county? And I think that plays a major role for us in this moment of understanding, how to draw these lines and who we're thinking about when we're drawing lines, and whether or not the lines that we currently have are representative of people that have a commitment, or populations that have commitments to democracy. And I think that's something that, it plays a role for us to be able to discuss some of the minutia, I guess, or the major court cases associated with who is a citizen, what is a resident, what's actually being considered in the drawing of lines, and whether or not drawing of lines can be considered just moving a little bit here and moving a little bit there, or if drawing of lines actually plays a role in whether or not somebody is representing a population, or an individual, you know what I'm saying? Like the little black girl, or, the homeless child, or the person living in their grandmother's house. Is that person being represented by their elected official? And I think that drawing the lines plays a role in understanding who the population is, helps us understand. And I like the idea that we're taking the thought of the entire population into this, because I feel like it expands a little bit more on what it is we're considering to be, who is a part of this. And I just want to make sure that my fellow commissioners kind of understand my thoughts on some of these questions, and I hope others, have the opportunity to speak on that if possible. Especially like I said, in this moment, we don't have much time, and we have a very important, thing that we have to do, and it's going to be important for the next decade. And I think it's something that we shouldn't take lightly as well. And so that's why I say, and I want to hear it from your perspective as someone from the Office of Law, because I know that we are relying on an objective opinion as you know, we kind of talked about previously, an objective opinion of what it is that we're all working from. And it helps to have the Office of Law give us that objective opinion, you know, because we could just be making it up, or we can have an objective opinion. You know, we could just be pulling things out of thin air and making things up, or we can have an objective opinion that has a legal basis. And I think that this is a moment where we can gather that foundation and build upon that foundation in a way that brings us all together as a community, as opposed to, you know, people just going off of a basis. And the other aspect that I want to mention in terms of that is to have your written opinion on these things helps us move forward as well, with a foundation that we all can go from. If we don't have your written opinion, it's easy for people to take your words out of context and, you know, have timelines be suggested that aren't included in the law, or timelines that don't reflect what it is, and then it becomes a debate. And so those are just some of my thoughts in regards to that. I don't mean to take up too much time, but in terms of minority representation, have we seen any previous cases in regards to Anne Arundel County and minority representation, being any lawsuits in regards to minority representation being made in Anne Arundel County?
Cali County Supervising County Attorney, I would have to look to be sure. I know some of the state challenges have but challenged state districts that included Anne Arundel County. I don't think there's ever been any challenges with regard to Anne Arundel County and the Councilmanic districts, but I would have to look at that to be sure.
Okay, Tori, did you have a question?
Yes, Tori Snow. If I'm understanding correctly, and I think perhaps addressing what Mr. Waddy was asking, does this document before us stand as the opinion of how the terms that we'll be discussing are defined?
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney. I cannot see you through the glass, but now I know you're there. This is really just a very brief overview of the criteria and the basics. You know, it condenses the 100 and however many pages Citizens Guide down to just a page and a half. So, you know, there's a lot more that
But
goes
it's safe
into
to say
that.
these are generally guidelines, correct? Like
Correct.
The overall, you tried to capture as much of the relevant details that we should be considering, and they are considered here as it relates to previous cases and discussions. To the best of your knowledge, you've given us the information that we need in order to make a decision. Is that correct?
Right, yeah, this condenses the Citizens Guide, which has a really good discussion of all these points in a lot more detail, but this kind of condenses all those factors down.
Is the Citizens Guide available? Like, I don't know if I'm late.
Yeah, it's
Where can we
something
get that?
Ms. Corby did provide
It is. It's in the Dropbox file that I created for you all. It's I think it's like 160 pages. I'm not entirely certain. So I didn't print it for this binder, but I did want to gauge your interest. I can have copies prepared for you if that would be something that you would like me to do.
I think what I'd be more interested in is perhaps if there are reference points related to this document, so not necessarily that we need it, but if we can pull it digitally and we can perhaps discuss some of these definitions, perhaps using that as a tool to maybe make our meetings more efficient, we can maybe have discussions about how that works. I don't know how the commission feels about that, but if the information is there, it feels like you put a lot of work into this document already, so. That's all, thank you.
Tom Fleckenstein, just to kind of jump in on that, this document here that they've provided, I mean, just from what my experience or what my knowledge is of some of this law, this is actually a very good, very brief summary and synopsis of what are the most important legal considerations that have to be taken into account when you're looking at drawing new districts. So as far as just kind of acquainting us with the types of things that maybe we would not necessarily know we have to consider, this does an excellent job of kind of telling us what those are. You're going to find a lot of case law and a lot of arcane stuff that's going to define compactness and a number of different varieties and things of that nature. But this really does, I think, crystallize it very nicely, at least for the beginning of our discussion on what we're going to have to consider. And kind of to address one of Mr. Wadi's earlier questions, again, I've done some work and some research on this. I'm not aware, and I haven't found, at least in the modern era, so to speak, and by that I mean since we've had charter government in Anne Arundel County, where there's been any kind of legal challenge to any of the districts here thus far based on minority representation.
Okay, Linda?
Linda Schuett, Legislative Counsel. Yay, I remember. So you know, on the other side of this, the reference to where you can find it online, that's one thing. And the second thing is, I don't remember how many pages it is, but it is really long. And a lot of it doesn't have much to do with this particular issue or how you go about doing it. So you can kind of page through a bunch in the beginning and a bunch at the end just to see if you think it's interesting, but you will get more information about these particular considerations.
Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, just for the record, on the citizens report, I jotted this down when I was looking at today, starting around page 54 in the PDF numbers, that's about where that discussion starts. It's about page 54 through 75-ish, where those factors are discussed in more detail. And then a lot of the report goes state by state, and a lot of things that you can kind of skip over because we don't need to know what other states do, but those are the central part of that report has a lot of that.
Great, thank you, Kelly. And I guess just for a comment, and I think we all would agree with you, Steve. I think we obviously we want to ensure that the districts they are fair representation. Yes, all individuals are represented through them. I guess I'll just throw out kind of my thought, and reading back through the reports from the last time, from the last Charter Revision Commission, I mean, it really appeared that the Office of Planning and Zoning, I mean, you did multiple maps. I know you looked closely at population, and there was probably a first cut, just trying to cut the districts, into equal population line, or close as you could get that. But I think then there were also multiple iterations. Probably the commission, I'm maybe reading a little bit into this, and I know, Linda, you were involved the last time. I'm not sure if any of you were from the Office of Planning and Zoning, but I mean, I guess I envision us doing multiple iterations to take the types of situations that you're raising. That way we have the ability to take those things into consideration. We can look at where lines would be drawn. Are they cutting communities in half? Are they not treating certain segments fairly? And that will be a discussion, and additional iterations will be run by the Office of Planning and Zoning, so we can ensure those things are properly addressed going forward. Because I think I would agree. I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I've followed enough of this over the course of my career, more at the state level, that there's a lot of factors, and yeah, I think it's kind of as you go through trying to make sure you're hitting the boxes, and I'm sure the Office of Law, as we go through and have those discussions, I'm sure you'll be weighing in at that time to ensure that we are meeting legal sufficiency and there aren't any issues in terms of minority representation. Yes, the districts are contiguous and those types of things, I would think.
Sure, Kelly County Supervising County Attorney, either I or Ms. Blair Klassmeyer will be here every time, so we can certainly weigh in on that. And just to get back to Mr. Wadi you asked a lot of questions, and so I understand you want an opinion. Is it possible that you can send the specific questions that you want me to answer, in an email, just so I can kind of know what I jotted down what you said, but I think it might be easier if you kind of put those questions in writing, and then we can get you something on that.
Yes,
on that.
definitely.
And I know that would include the timeline that you asked for as well.
Definitely. And I thought what Vice Chair suggested, was something to think about in terms of moving forward, how to address the maps and whether or not they hit the criteria that's been suggested by the Office of Law. And I think that'd be a good way to move forward in terms of our discussions. I'm sorry. So that's all I have.
Okay. So, Linda?
Just a quick one. If you do send an email to Ms. Kelly, this is an area where you can get into an Open Meetings Act problem. So you should send the email to her or to yourself and to her, but only have them as BCC so they can't respond to you.
Okay.
I don't think I said it exactly correctly, but it's,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but part of my function is to help you all with what we're talking about here. I think we've already kind of established that. I think that might be good if we continue with that. So your asks for information, things like that, is something I can help to get to the right people. That's another sort of role that I provide to you all as a commission.
I think that's a better suggestion, that everything just go through Laura.
Right.
And she'll get
We had sort of unofficially established that, I think, so maybe we should make it a little more formal.
So at the risk
Sounds
of
good.
butting in, Steve Kaisigler, Planning and Zoning Officer again, yeah, we had requested that. As you know, I've participated in these efforts in other places. They're very dynamic. And you're going to be it's going to be a very iterative process. You're going to be thinking about things. You're going to be asking us to produce a variety of different graphic depictions of how this could look based on a whole bunch of different factors. We want to avoid individual commission members reaching out to us and saying, hey, could you do this? Other ones saying similar things. So it would help us immensely. This is, we're in a very compressed time period. We have a number of other huge projects we're working on. We're going to staff you at every level we can, but if we can coordinate this through Ms. Corby, that would be the best for us.
Yep, sounds good, you got it. Make it easier for all of us. Actually, I do have a gavel. I've never had one of these before. Yes. All right. Okay, any more questions or comments about the
Just a quick
Office of Law
follow-up. This
discussion?
is Tom Fleckenstein. So, Ms. Shu, it sounds like maybe you're concerned that if we get on email chains or somebody gets on an email chain where we all could potentially chime in and start discussing, that we may actually be having a meeting that would need to be open, that type of thing?
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, why don't we move on then to the next item on our agenda, which is the map discussion with Office of Planning and Zoning. And I'm not sure who is going to lead that discussion.
Hi, I'm going to start it off. Christina Pompa, Deputy Planning and Zoning Officer in the Office of Planning and Zoning. Steve Ziegler has already introduced himself, and then to my right, your left, is Mark Burt, who is the Planning Administrator of the Research and GIS section. Obviously excited to be here this evening, and as you are asking many of the questions to law, we have some answers we hope for you. And so tonight, let's go to the next slide. Tonight, we want to talk to you a little bit about the Esri dashboards that we have provided to you. We'll talk about applying the 2010 redistricting process to the 2020 adjusted population data as a jumping off point. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the Esri redistricting software. So I know that Mark had sent you all information about the Esri dashboards, and we thought that we would start there and then start to talk about some of the population data and what next steps could be.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Mark Burt, Planning Administrator for the Research and GIS section. So we're going to start off talking a little bit about the web maps and apps that the Commission has access to. After review, we will try to make some of these public if they're appropriate to make public. So the first web map that I wanted to talk to the Commission about is the County Census Data for Dashboards web map. Now, this is the web map that powers some of the dashboards that I'm going to display for you. You can use this web map on your own. I didn't keep open the backstage area where we have access to access the web maps, but if you do have questions about how to access, feel free to reach out. So with these web maps, they are interactive. You can zoom in as far as you want. You can pan around. And what's nice is the rich data. So there are 2 data sets in here with the pop-up. Scroll over, and this is all the census data that we have is in the pop-up. It's a little compressed. Didn't expand it. You can see what we're looking at, the 2010 population, the 2020 population, and then race and ethnicity. Any voting age population of 18 and over, and then it also goes into those race and ethnicity. I would like to talk a little bit about the adjusted 2020 total population. We've received that from the state of Maryland, and it has been adjusted to reassign Maryland residents in state and federal correctional institutions to their last known addresses, and to exclude out-of-state residents in correctional institutions from redistricting. Now, this is different from the way it was done in 2010, where the population excluded non-resident prison populations. So in the 2020 data that we're using has been adjusted to have the in-state populations back to where they came from, back to their last known addresses. So, yeah, let's there we go. I'm afraid that that's going to come out. We lose the screen. So the first dashboard that I want to talk to you about is the 2010-2020 census data comparison. And what this is showing you is the 2010 population, the 2020 population, and the 2020 adjusted population. I know it's a lot to digest and it's a lot to look at. So we have these filters where you can get down into the districts. So if you want to see for a specific district what that population comparison is, you can. Now this dashboard contains all of the adjusted 2020 census data, and again, it is a lot to digest. So you can filter down through, and you can hover over each category to see which, what that category is.
And the keys at the bottom.
Yeah, and down here at the bottom of the graphic is the key showing which what data is displayed in the dashboard. Now, if you would want to take a closer look at the dashboard, you can pop it out to the full screen using the little pinch point here in the corner, the top right corner. Now, if you would want to, I don't think we have any other functionality built into this. No. Okay.
Can I click here?
Yeah. And if you want to click on a council district to get data, you can always click in the map. And whenever there is an arrow at the top, the data will be expandable, or there will be multiple layers to select. So again, the same population that was in the original web map. The next web map I want to talk about is the 2020 voting age, or the 18 and over population. Again, it's broken down, broken the same way. You can look at the county as a whole. Sometimes it takes a little for the county data to come up because it is such a large data set. Again, you can hover over, and the key at the bottom tells you the categories. The last web dashboard that I wanted to talk about was the comparison of the 2010 and 2020 adjusted population comparison. And this is where we're looking at the ideal district population. And that's taking the 7 districts and dividing the total population by 7 to get that ideal number. And that ideal number that we've come up with from the 2020 adjusted population is 83,600 and some change. The actual number is, it's not going to give it to me because it rounds. My apologies.
I would go ahead and go up to this.
Oh, yeah.
And go to this.
I forgot it was there. Thank you. So we were talking about the total population and the ideal population. So for the districts, we were able to calculate the deviation, or what that change was, from the ideal population to the current population, and what that percentage of deviation is. And you'll see that the deviations or the percent deviations on the far right are color coded. The ones in yellow are the districts that are meeting that 5% threshold. So they're within the ideal population. The ones in green are lower than the ideal population, so they would need to be adjusted upward. And the two percent deviations in red display populations that are above that ideal district population would have to be brought down. You can see from this chart, the ideal population and the deviation, we're not that far off. So it's and like I said, we're able to show this in a web map here, or in a dashboard here. Displaying the adjusted populations, and then showing those ones that are within the three districts. And my apologies for the districts being out of order on the bottom of the in the table here. I didn't realize the data was in that state. So if you look at District 1 here on this end, and then 2 is in the middle, this will get straightened out for you before we release it. But this allows us to quickly see which districts are exceeding, meeting, or below that ideal council district population, and where they fall in that 5% above or below the ideal population. And when the web map comes back up, let's click on District 6. You can see in District 6 here, I selected District 6 in the table, so it's in the map here. You can see the populations and the relationship and everything. And that's what I have on the dashboards. And I also wanted to touch on the redistricting software that we do have access to. It is Esri Redistricting. And what Esri Redistricting allows us to do is bring in the adjusted 2020 population, or if we want to look at the unadjusted numbers from the census, we have the ability to look at those, set that standard deviation percentage. So if we wanted to see it at 10%, 5%, 2.5%, we can set those thresholds and see what what that ideal population is and run scenarios based on that. So we can do a as-is condition, the starting condition as is, and then start to distribute where we want to distribute.
I guess, well, first, Mr. Burt, Andrea Mansfield, Mr. Burt, could we get actually copies of some of these charts? Mm-hmm. That may be easier. I like looking at stuff like that. It's a little easier to understand. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, David Kaufman, will they be in the Dropbox, or will they be for binders, Laura? Any additional like charts like these, would they be going up into the Dropbox? Would they carrier pigeon?
I guess if possible, I'd like to have hard copies for our binders, just because it's easier. That way we'd have them here and they're easier to access than trying to get into the Dropbox or to the maps online.
Sorry for the levity, my fault.
So, hi, this is Laura here. Sorry, we would like all of this information, and I have talked, Mark and Christina and I talked about it before we began. I think that is the plan, to get all of this to us in some kind of a shareable fashion as soon as possible. And in terms of sharing it with you all, I did develop the Dropbox because I had some trouble getting the Gmail products to work with some of the non-Gmail email addresses. If the Dropbox is not working, you can let me know. It helps for when I need to send you big documents, because in the county we have a limit on what I can send you. So anyway, please let me know what's working and what's not working, and we will get this stuff for you all in some kind of a piece of paper format.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fleckenstein?
A quick question for Mark. You mentioned the redistricting software would be this Esri Redistricting. Is that what we're going to have to work with? Are we obligated to use it? Are there other potential options? I mean, I know there's other programs, other software and things of that nature that are out there and available.
That's the one that I'm most familiar with that we have access to. I know that there's other ones out there. There's, on the state redistricting website, they have one on there that,
right,
that you can use.
Mr. Kai Ziegler?
So real quick, Steve Kai Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer. Yeah, I wanted Mark to talk a little bit about the software that we're using. It is very, very commonly used throughout the United States. I'm not going to say most jurisdictions use it, but many, many do. It is what we have access to. If there was a desire to go to something else, we would have to purchase it, buy licenses, learn how to use it, which would slow us down. That's one. The other is just in the really base information that Mr. Burt was showing about dividing up the population equally. We need to keep in mind that that is just raw population numbers. There's no filters below it. It's just if every person in Anne Arundel County was exactly the same and we just divided by 7. So I want to make sure that was clearly understood. As you get into your discussions, you're going to be adding a whole bunch of layers that you're going to want us to add into this.
But that's the 2020 adjusted population of the entire county divided by 7. And those are the numbers that essentially we would use as in guidance to try to draw the districts based on the 7 that we've got to draw at this point in time, correct?
So I would say that's where you start.
That is correct, though. That is what the data is that we have shown you.
Okay.
Hi, Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. I just want to make a couple comments. So you have the report, the redistricting report that was done in 2011. At the bottom of page 1, it starts to get into considerations for redistricting, and then at the top of page 2, it starts to talk about what they did with their methodology. The table that we have put up on the screen is similar to what they did. And again, it's a jumping off point because it seems that the first decision to be made is how much deviation is there going to be. In 2011, there were 2 recommendations that were sent to the county council. One was a simplified plan, and the other was alternative number 5. It turns out that the county council ended up adopting the simplified plan. My recommendation as a jumping off point for you is that we use the Esri redistricting software to give you a simplified plan. How do we take the numbers in this chart and bring them all into yellow? What would be one scenario to do that? And then once we've done that, you start drilling into the details of communities and race and ethnicity. Now, Mr. Waddy at the last meeting talked about communities of interest. I've done a little research, and I have a little bit of information that I would like to share to you because that's another consideration. And when you have your public hearing, those are the kinds of things that people are going to testify about. We saw in this report that people testified 10 years ago about the fact that they wanted a rural district, which is now District 7. So, okay, here we go. And I have the notes on my machine, so just give me a second here. I'm sorry. All right, so in 2021, in May of 2021, the County Council adopted the county's general development plan, which is called Plan 2040. And that was a 3-year process to get to that May adoption date. One of the things that happened as part of the general development plan process was that we came up with a communities map that went into the plan, and we added communities together based on our Citizen Advisory Committee recommendations and recommendations from visioning sessions, 16 visioning sessions that happened throughout the county. Those communities, once they were put together, they became regions. And our general development plan in the county recognizes 9 regions based on the communities being put together. So while our communities map in Plan 2040 is not truly a communities of interest map, as Mr. Waddy asked, it is the closest thing we have. And we do want to add this layer into your Esri dashboards so that you can see it, because it has been vetted through the public. It also could be a starting point where during your public hearings, people can make comments. Well, I don't exactly agree with the line here because X. So I did want to let you know that we researched further on that issue, and you will find that communities of interest is referenced in the 2010 report at the bottom of page 1. So it is important. And I think that this communities map that was developed as part of the county's general development plan is another great jumping off point to then gather additional data. And that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Sorry, I keep leaving it on, leaving it off, whatever. Sorry about that. Thank you. I guess, and I'm going to assume maybe we probably have some questions or comments from commission members, but I think I like where you were going, and I guess if we were going to have kind of a jumping off point, I think it would make sense, one, to kind of do the simple calculation based on population, and then if you could overlay that with the communities of interest, we could have the two variations and see what that would look like, at least for a starting point for our conversations. And I'm not sure if there's any other iterations that may make sense at this point until we kind of start seeing how things kind of start shaking out and where these lines could, would be drawn. So I'll throw that out. Any
Sure.
comments or thoughts? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Mr.
Torres Snow. This is a really fascinating map. Fantastic. Is there background information in the general development plan related to these different districts and the ways that they're lined up, and just so we can kind of learn a little bit about why they are drawn the way they are?
Thank you for asking that, Vice Chair Snow. Yes, there is, and it's in both Volume 1 and Volume 2. So what I am going to do is send Laura an email that she will distribute to you that has the links. Volume 1 is easier to open than Volume 2 because Volume 2 is about 230 some pages. But we do have them online and you can access them, and I actually have the page references. For instance, page 68 and 69 in Volume 1, and then pages 225 and 229 in Volume 2. But I will send all that information to Laura.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Waddy?
Thank you. I did want to thank you so much for even taking my random thoughts into consideration at the time. And I appreciate the work that you all have done. I've been trying to play with the map all day long in between working. And I was wondering also about the COVID-19 data dashboard and whether or not you all have access to that and being added into the communities of interest, or whether that could be overlaid, whether or not you have other departments, because I know, clearly we have the Plan 2040 issue, but there's been other maps that have been overlaid as well. And I mean, I can definitely reach out to you all outside of this meeting, but that was something that I wanted to be sure that we also discussed in terms of other data mapping that might be going on within the county government, and how they play a role in addressing communities of interest.
Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. Mr. Waddy, one of the things Mark and I talked about earlier today was that we definitely need in the dashboards a map that has the Councilmanic districts, that you can overlay the communities, that you can overlay the school districts. And if there's other data that you think is relevant, please ask us. Now, the COVID data doesn't originate in our department, but hopefully, if it is of interest to you, we can still, working through the Office of Information Technology, GIS section, get that and include it in our dashboard.
I'm sorry, are there are we only limited to government data? Is it like in terms of identifying communities of interest, or are we allowed to bring in like Nielsen market data or Arbitron data or something like that?
I guess as the chair, maybe I'll comment on that briefly. I guess I would, and obviously this is for discussion from the commission members, but I guess I would want to ensure whatever data we're using is something that we know we can justify. So I mean, I think the county is planning and zoning and the GIS staff, there are experts here for the county, and I think we would want to use data that we know that they are, educated on, they know how to use, they can explain it clearly, and that we want to ensure whatever we put out there, that we can actually justify what we've done based on the numbers, and we have the support to back us up. So I guess I just would suggest maybe we want to be careful, not that maybe we couldn't, but I just think we want to be careful about what other types of data we pull into the process, just to be sure what we do does hold legal sufficiency, should we find ourselves in that situation, which hopefully we do not. But any other comment, Mr. Fleckenstein?
Well, I would think, at least when we're talking about redistricting, I would think we're certainly limited and obligated to whatever the official census data is, and that's the information on that stuff that you guys have, correct? And so anything that you're talking about, population, adjusted population, any of that, that's all based on the official 2020 census numbers, correct?
Yeah, it's Mark Burt, Office Planning and Zoning. Yes, that is correct. It is U.S. Census data that we'd be using for that. Okay. The adjusted data that we talked about does come from the state of Maryland.
Sure, but those are official census numbers. That's what legally the state and the congressional reapportionment will all have to consider, and so will we, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we also have a planner demographer on staff that has been looking at the distribution of population and has a methodology that allows us to put population points on the map to show population density. That's something that we're working on the show moving forward. It will allow us to see those populations where they are. If we're looking at race and ethnicity, if we're looking at straight population, it'll come out in that map.
Okay.
Ashley Hanglater, I'm just looking for a little clarification. In regards to the Esri dashboard or the Esri redistricting tool that you're speaking of, that's something that we should email Laura in order to send over to you different possibilities and you guys will run them, correct?
The process hasn't been discussed yet. That's how I would envision it, is any requests that you have can either be drawn on a paper map or discussed on where you want that line to be, and then we can draw that line appropriately or from there.
Yeah, I guess if I could just throw out, it may make sense, and get Andrea Mansfield, commission member, it might make sense if we have those, if we want to have maps run in a certain way, maybe we discuss them during our meetings, and that way it's clear and it's a clear direction. We can always follow up with Laura, but that way we all have the input and it's done publicly so everyone knows how we would like these iterations to be run.
Absolutely, I agree. I just didn't know if we had a tool that broke it down to the block level and the subdivision level, or if that's just something you guys will run for us.
Well, the Esri Redistricting tool allows you to drill all the way down to the block level. We're looking at data already at the block level, so we're going as far down in census geographies as we can go with that data.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Waddy?
Yeah, I agree that it's good to have the discussions in public, but I also think we will be presenting maps from our discussions outside of our discussions. And so I agree that it's great that we ask these questions also in public, and I also think, it's going to be necessary for us to be able to have the opportunity to see, what you all, I think Commissioner Snow mentioned being able to see the updates to whatever it might be made to the maps at a, I guess, real-time live stream level, I guess. And I think that that was a great idea and a suggestion and would be good for us. In regards to addressing the census data, are we including the 2015 to 2019 American Community Survey data as well into this in terms of down to the, I guess, the block level or zip code level?
The ACS data is not considered in the census data. What we'll be using is the adjusted census numbers from the state of Maryland and the Census Bureau. ACS is just a sample of every 5 years. It's not a complete census, so it does have a lot of assumptions built into it. So we'll be looking at the 2020 census numbers.
I understand. In terms of having that access, it would be very helpful to be able to overlay a map from 2015, 2019 ACS, American Community Survey data, especially if we're going to have data from this general development plan included as well, to be able to think about, because the process around the general development plan also had assumptions built into it. And there's assumptions built into every census as well, which I think is part of the discussion that we've had. Mm-hmm. And in regards to that, the discussion around what makes up a particular district, the contiguity of it, the diversity of it, those are also, I guess, legal questions that can address, in some ways, the current maps, but also what other maps are possible. So you might be thinking about how to be contiguous around a community of interest, not just a particular population, or you understand, you're shaking your head, yes. So, but that would help in terms of being able to have that ability to think about these things spatially.
Okay, Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, David Kaufman. What I think I'm hearing you say, Mr. Waddy, is this desire and the effort to try and drill down as much as we possibly can our representation needs within our community while we have this opportunity to address it. I couldn't agree more with you. One of the challenges I think we're going to have is that we're such a data-rich society now that we have the potential of spending the next 10 years in all of the various options that we have. And what I'd encourage us to do is to really, when we get this preliminary look at the map, really identify where there's any head scratchers within terms of, we look at a community and we go, wait a second, this doesn't make any sense to me based on what I know about our community or what I know about the needs of the community. And various other information points certainly are all going to inform all of our perspectives on this. I would want to make sure, because there are so many media biases and I'm not suggesting any of the ones you referenced are among them, but there are so many media bias options with regards to data that we run risks how far we spread that network of information. So until we get to a point in our conversations where we're in a contentious space over, well, wait a second, I'm looking at this here, and I know that this community is not really it's being split up by where we put the line, and well, that doesn't show up in this piece of information or this piece of information. There may be other data we can seek to get a better understanding, but I worry about so many points of data and overlay at this point, choking us to a point where we can't even begin the process. So, but I want you to hear clearly that I'm with you 100% in terms of trying to make sure that we get representation right in this work that we're doing. So, that's my opinion.
Mr. Snow?
Tori Snow. as a data application manager and a data analyst, I was every request I sensed a kindred spirit about all these layers and all this data. I did want to just share with the commission my methodology and my philosophy as I approach my responsibilities here. The county has a responsibility to manage certain data points specifically related to the official designated data points related to our communities and our districts. And so from my personal approach, there are some things that I think are reasonable to request. Like I think that the communities of interest being part of a formal county process with discussion and collaboration, I think it is reasonable to request that that be integrated into our layers, as well as any other formally collected data measures. However, there are other data considerations that I would like to consider, and obviously we have tools. We have the redistricting tool, which I believe would give us some latitude to maybe apply that if we're looking at a map or looking at some data. And so I've kind of taken that on as my responsibility to bring that in and then bring that discussion to the commission in our meetings. And then if perhaps there's enough consensus, then perhaps we say, can we present this request so that we're not overwhelming the data teams with a lot of requests? And so that's just my perspective, my approach on this, and I just wanted to get some input from those that are managing the application and configuring it, if that seems like a reasonable balance, or maybe you can take on more, take on less. Just my thoughts on your thoughts on that.
Any response from planning and zoning?
Mike Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. Yeah, I agree with you. There are some data sets out there that we can probably bring in once we have that base data set, like that base data that we know we're going to use, have evaluated it, make sure that it's all comes out right, and then we can start adding in those other data sets that we've identified that will enhance and inform this whole process.
Mr. Fleckenstein?
And just to jump on the conversation, we may also have a pretty unique opportunity here. Don't forget, we're not just potentially doing districts for the next election, but we may find, and one of the things that I'm interested in looking at, for instance, on this commission is, we've had 7 Councilmanic districts forever here in Anne Arundel County, and obviously our population has grown by leaps and bounds. My guess is when we look at the data from when we first went to 7 Councilmanic districts to where we are today. So we may, through the course of our entire process, we may look at all that and we may decide, hey, maybe one of the things that we want to recommend is we want to expand the council. Maybe we want to have 8 districts, 9 districts, 10 districts. And if we were to get to that point, and again, I'm not saying that we will get there, I'm just saying that I think it's something I'm interested in looking at, and we may get to that process, maybe after we get through these initial districts that we've got to get done, that may give us a real good opportunity to really dive into things like communities of interest and how we then break up representation across the county as a whole. Again, I don't know what any of this data says yet, right? But, that could be another process where we've got the opportunity to maybe at some point be drawing 8 districts, 9 districts, 10 districts, whatever the case may be. And my guess is that would put us in a position to really drill down more on smaller areas of representation, communities of interest, things of that nature that haven't really been addressed before and maybe aren't going to be reflected in this first round of districts. So just, kind of food for thought, not to complicate what we've got to do now, but that could present us with a real opportunity to really get into that discussion.
Commission members?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Waddy?
Tory's suggestion, or Commissioner Snow's suggestion, in regards to how to handle data requests. I'm not sure if we want to resolve that in this moment, or is that something?
I guess, Tory, could you please?
Is that a motion, or?
No.
Well, I'd like Mr. Snow to explain what his comments were previously about the data request.
Certainly. I think that it was more just in explaining my process. I don't know if I wanted to embrace it. I feel like right now, the best place would be to start with what's already out there, and then as we build along the process, we may submit more requests, but I do think at some point we would want to create some guidance on how we want to request data from planning and zoning, because those are man hours, those are resources. It's not just as simple as, you have to convert data, you have to make sure it's in the right formats, JSONs or whatever. So at some point we would probably want to create some consensus on how we request new maps that aren't part of the data set. I'm mostly focused on stuff that's not part of. If it's already in your database, I don't think it's too much of a heavy lift. But if we're, like you'd mentioned, what was the ACS surveys and things like that, if we decide that that's the case, I think we should be a little more formal in how we present that request, and then we can get reasonable expectations on when we can get that back as well, because it may take a day, may take a week, may take 2 weeks to convert the data. So that's my recommendation. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. Yeah, I guess I would like us to have some more. Sorry. I mean, I would prefer us to have a more formal process in making those types of requests, only because, I mean, it is staff time. I mean, if we're all sending requests into Laura to have planning and zoning run additional maps and so forth, I mean, it could get really overwhelming. So I guess I would like us to have a more coordinated approach going forward in how we do that. I think it would just make it easier for us as well as the staff, and we're not totally overloading them. So I guess if we could move forward in a manner, I mean, obviously, I would prefer that that's how we move forward in doing that, so we do have some order in that stuff.
Can I ask you, Mr. Kai-Ziegler, if you have a protocol already in terms of requests?
So Steve Kai-Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer, not in the way that you've asked the question, but I like now what I'm hearing. Keep in mind that your effort is being done very much in the public eye. This isn't the first time this has ever been done. I can tell there's going to be an enormous amount of interest in seeing different versions of either off-the-shelf product or more customized products. So to the extent that you can talk amongst yourselves and agree on a set of priorities on, if you want to say, maps related to data, we can discuss what we think in real time about how long it will take us to produce that. Some of them are easier, some of them are much more difficult. We don't want to make mistakes because everything we're doing is very clearly in the public eye, and it's important work that you're doing. So I think the protocol would be, what's really going to not work well is if individuals send a request to Laura saying, I'd like to see 13 different versions of this, I'd like to see 4. I can tell you we won't be able to staff that. And if you think about the frequency that you're going to be meeting over the next couple of months, it kind of is all hands on deck in the GIS group for us to be able to do this work. And we don't want to make mistakes, so we have to double and triple check it. So to the extent you can talk about it in the public setting and agree on what you'd like to see for the next meeting, we'll do the best in the moment to say we can do that, or I can give you half that or 2/3 of it.
Okay, thank you. So I guess, well, Mr. Funkelstein, do you have another comment or question?
No, I guess a question in light of that, and this will be for the lawyers who are near and dear to my heart. If we were to have a process where, let's say, somebody had a question or wanted to request some data, and we wanted to discuss it among ourselves, potentially to come up with maybe giving the chair, the vice chair, or somebody else we designate the ability to ask a question. If we were to have some kind of a email discussion or group chat amongst us, are we running afoul of the open meeting? Okay.
Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney, just so that is on the record, yes, you would be. If 4 of you have an email discussion, a text discussion, in-person discussion, Skype discussion, whatever the case may be, you're subject to the Open Meetings Act.
Which means it would have to have been advertised, correct?
It would have to be advertised, it'd have to be open to the public, you'd have to have minutes, yes.
All right, Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, David Kaufman. Not to volunteer you for tasks, Madam Chair, but I'm wondering if you're the funnel point towards Laura with regards to that kind of synthesis so that we're not, I'm not concerned that you're going to filter out my request and not have it be considered, but in the context of managing this volume of data, because it's quite possible that my request may be very similar to the request that Tom's giving you, or Commissioner Fleckenstein is giving you, and you've got that opportunity to be able to a little synthesize that and as we move it forward. Because again, this is a commission who did say that our primary goal is to try and get this ready for approval for this next election. So that's a lot of work between now and then, and so we want to make sure that we're efficient about it.
Mr. Snow? Sorry, Mr. Wadi?
Thank you. Commissioner Fleckenstein, you mentioned in terms of increasing councilmanic districts, and I was wondering if there's if that's included in a timeline, what that might look like in terms of a timeline. Do we do that in the charter? Do we do that in the legislative district? I actually had that question coming into this meeting previously as well.
So as I understand it, that'd be something that we would potentially recommend as a charter revision. That would be something we would be required to agree on, pass, however our process is, to report to the council within a year. And then I guess if and at that point it would be on the ballot in the next election after that. So that's not necessarily something, in fact, I think we probably would be precluded from doing that when we're initially starting with redistricting for the purpose of taking the current law and the current districts that we have to get done, which is we're going to be limited to 7. But let's say we all, looked into that issue and we thought, hey, expanding the council is a great idea. I think, and the lawyers again can correct me if I'm wrong, but that would be something that we would be able to deal with within our year period of time and then make a recommendation at the end of before the end of our year is one of the potential charter review recommendations we would make. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, any comments from the legal team?
Kelly County Supervising
I'm
County
sorry,
Attorney.
I was Tom Fleckenstein. I didn't identify myself again.
You're correct, Mr. Fleckenstein. That would all come as a charter amendment recommendation to the county council, which would have to be voted on by the council, and then it would have to be on the ballot. So you could not, redistrict 9 districts right now, because at first that would have to be approved by the voters and then, go forward from there. But it is something that could be a possible charter amendment.
Ms. Schuett?
Linda Schuett, Legislative Council. I was just going to say that I looked into this recently, and first of all, I was very surprised that there are other counties in this state that did increase the number of districts that they have. And I just want to say that it would be a major rewrite of the charter. It's not an easy thing to do. It's not like just change this here and there. It's a major rewrite. And there are always considerations like we can't have 8 or 10 because we need to have a vote of the majority. So those kinds of things would need to be taken into account. But it is, I think, a really valid thing to consider in the next phase of this.
Okay, that's good to know.
Mr. Kai Ziegler?
Steve Kai Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer. I want to follow up with something Ms. Schuett just said. Trying to increase the number is a far more complicated thing. I think I shared with you in our first meeting, a lifetime ago in Queen Anne's County, small place at the time, 40,000 people. They wanted to go from 3 county commissioners at large to 5 county commissioners. And so their redistricting group, what the first thing they had to do in a timeline is we went through this process that you're going to go through, changing out 3 to 5 that was acceptable and adoptable in a time period that then allowed future candidates to be able to file to run for office in the new districts, one of the 5. And it adds a level of complexity that is difficult to imagine unless you're in the midst of it. The other thing I wanted to say, I want to just come back to the point about how we do assignments, how we staff you. Just a suggestion, as you're discussing things, and this may be, I would like, someone up here may say, how would we like to see this scenario run? And you'll have a brief discussion. It might make sense to ask us, planning and zoning staff, can you do this? And we might respond with easy, it's off the shelf, or hard, we don't know how to do that, it will take more time, or we simply don't know. At the end of your meeting, we do a quick recap where we will, I'm going to say, repeat back what we heard of our assignments, which ones of those we can do for the next meeting, which may have to take more time and go to the next meeting. But we try and leave every one of these public meetings. Again, it's really important that this happens in the public eye, so that the public who's watching this can see your deliberations, what you're asking us to research and produce. But every time we leave a meeting, we have a really good idea about what we're going to produce for you for the next or the following meeting, if that works. And you can just do it in real time. Every time it comes up, you want to see a scenario, easy, hard, I don't know. And then at the end, we'll parrot that back to you. Would that work?
Yes.
Yes, that sounds like a great approach. And actually, if there weren't any more questions or comments, I was going to try to summarize, okay, this is what we're looking for for the next meeting. But Mr. Kaufman, go ahead.
David Kaufman, if I'm hearing Mr. Fleckenstein's summary or suggestion or idea, is it that there's a thought that we might propose a revision so that it gets through on the next election, even though we don't have to, because we don't have to make a revision prior to the next election based on the timeline we're in, and then possibly propose, I guess what I'm thinking is that if we get to a point where the data suggests that we're really looking at a 9-district county councilmanic model, would it not just make sense for us to invest our energy into that, allow the next election to occur on the existing map so that our energy is spent trying to get right those, I'm trying to understand what the rush to change it just for this one election, what the value would be, if that question makes sense.
It does, and I'll try to explain a little bit of my thought process again, and I didn't mean to take this into a whole new place. This was just kind of something I've thought about getting ready for this. There's a couple issues with that, even though that seems to make eminent sense. One, current county charter is we've got 7 councilmanic districts, so we can't do anything to change that now. Any change to that would going to have to be by charter amendment that we recommend the council passes and that the county voters approve eventually, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so even if we were to decide and recommend that we think the council should be expanded, let's say, it's going to be so far down the line that would come into play that we would not be able to accomplish what we need to by redistricting based on our current charter with the new population where we have to come up with 7 districts for people to vote on, because that election might, you might be right, we may not get it done for the 2022 election, but we certainly would have to have it done for the 2026 election. And it's possible that even if we recommended some kind of charter amendment, it wouldn't even be adopted or it could not be adopted at all, right? And so I think if we didn't do our districts currently for 7, we could potentially create a much larger issue over the next 6 years and 2 election cycles for the council.
David Kaufman replying. I think the last part is where the clarity came for me, and that is there's nothing saying that our recommendation for 9 ever gets approved, and then what is then the final recommendation for the redistricting. So that
Right, and
that
that
last point
fallback
brought
is going to
clarity.
have to be whatever the districts that we recommend to the council and whether they pass it based on the 7 districts that are currently legally authorized, I guess is the way of looking at it. I think. Does that make sense, Ms. Schuett? Ms. Kenny?
I think it does make sense.
Okay.
Linda Schuett, Legislative Counsel. I think the main thing is that while you're doing all of that relating to the charter and all of that and adding more districts, there are districts which have too many people in them and districts that don't have enough people in them. So those people are getting denied, it may be getting denied, of the vote that they want to, it's not fair, bottom line.
Okay, so I guess if the commission members are comfortable, I mean, I'm happy to serve as the conduit to get information to Ms. Corby, just so we have a kind of a clear process on how that will work.
Can we clarify that? Is that okay? I just want to be clear on, because there could be potentially lots of asks for different kinds of information. So I think what I heard is that if you are specifically asking for a map, that by the end of the meeting, perhaps you can have a point where you kind of summarize the requests, and you've said, like, you know, okay, we're asking for 1, 2, 3 maps, and that's going to go directly to OPZ. By the time the next meeting comes around, they're going to have the 3 maps ready, not ready, or it's something, you know, something like that. And if it is not a map request, if you want other information, then we can talk about that. We can talk about how we can get that for you. The things that I do is research. So if you need previous legislation pulled, any kind of research, stuff like that, I can certainly help with that. Otherwise, I can funnel what you need to the right person, get it to you. But then we're conserving those resources. I think if there is some kind of response that would benefit the whole commission, it would make sense that you all see it. It may be one person's question, but it may be an answer for all 7 of you, and so we can help make that happen. Sound like a good plan?
Yes, yep, absolutely, yes. I would like us to have conversations about the maps and what iterations to be run, and to have that done in a public setting. That way it's very clear the direction that you guys have and what we're looking for. And then along those lines, I guess what I'm hearing, at least for our first set, we would like planning and zoning to run kind of the simple population maps and see what those look like, and we would like you to do an overlay with the community of interest. Were there any other maps that members would like to see in this first iteration?
David Kaufman, is there any easily just illustrating where the density and population changes have occurred? I mean, that the change areas, that would be helpful for me.
Yes, and you're also going to provide the additional charts that you showed us on the screen. So we have those. Okay, Ms. Schuett?
Just a suggestion. Wouldn't you also want to see, could planning and zoning provide X number of ways in which you could cure the deficiencies in population in one district versus the other? So that here are 5 ways where you could change the district. This is the tweaking thing. Here are 5 ways you could do that, or however many you think is appropriate. If that makes any sense.
Yes.
Because I think you're never going to get, unless you go tweaking, and I'm not proposing that you should, but unless you go the tweak method, you're never going to get this done in December. It's just not going to happen, I thought. But that's just me.
Ms. Pompa?
Hi, Christina Pompa with OPZ. Initially, Ms. Schuett, we had envisioned simply giving them a simplified plan and then getting their input, rather than us doing, let's say, 5 scenarios off the bat. And I don't know if, Mark, if you have some thoughts on that.
That's kind of my thought also, was to provide this Mark Bird, Office of Planning and Zoning. That was my thought, was to provide that initial base, let the commissioners see that, digest it, and start to formulate how they would want to see their districts change.
Mr. Kai-Ziegler?
Steve Kai-Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer. So I want to add to that, because part of it, Ms. Schuett, is I think you're saying, just on the base population numbers, could we move the lines around so they're equal? Or closer. We could, but I'm not sure what that tells you, because this group is going to want to go much, much finer than raw population numbers, I believe. And that's the part, the difficulty is, while we could show that, I'm not sure how helpful it's going to be. If the group wants to see it, we can adjust numbers, but it's going to be the raw population numbers. It isn't going to show anything below that, which I think you're going to want to see those other layers.
And Tom Fleckenstein, and if you were to do that, you could probably draw those 7 different things a million different ways, right?
A million different ways.
Okay.
Larry Telford, question for Planning and Zoning. How will the first map be presented to us? Are you taking the 7 districts we already have and just physically changing them to match the populations, or how would that work? Because in any given district, you could go north, south, east, west, depending on where it is. So how's your first shot going to do this?
Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. I was looking at it a little bit today, I mean, if I were going to do this, I might start with District 7, because District 7 has no place to go but to the north. It only has a little bit of change that it needs. So that might be the first step. And then we're going to have to look at where we have the bigger problems. And when I say problem, I mean the bigger discrepancies, which districts those are. But the reason I made that recommendation is it does mirror what the 2010 group did, and I think it was a good methodology when I read the report. And the interesting thing to me is the simplified version that went forward plus alternative 5 in the report, council still ended up going with the simplified district, the simplified plan. And that's why I thought, let's just start with simplified plan. And then yes, once we can get what I envision is going to be kind of a heat map showing the different ethnicities and race and a lot of the other factors, the communities that we showed, which I can tell you, those communities do not follow Councilmanic districts. We have some regions that are going to have representation in like 5 Councilmanic districts because they were based on communities, not on political lines. So once we start to get all of those layers and you all can look at that and then give us what Mr. Kai Ziegler is identifying as the more aggressive changes, and we run those scenarios for you. But at least let's get one out there with the additional data that you're going to want to see.
So again, Steve Kai Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer. I look at it, I think Ms. Pompa is absolutely correct. You take initially the path of least resistance, the lowest hanging fruit. You know in District 7 that the only thing that can occur is you have to move north. So that's one. And then you start taking down if there are other paths of least resistance. And that again, this is a starting point. We know these lines are likely going to change through all your deliberations and discussions, but for us, like I said, we could produce a million different versions of this, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to be comfortable with it, and part of it's going to be you're going to have to tell us what you really want to see, and each time you do that, it will change the paradigm. Every time we do that, there'll be a different version that we look at. Part of what I want to ask is for actually Mr. Burt, do you think we have the ability to make any of these adjustments in real time during a meeting?
That's a good question.
Mr. Kai Ziegler, that's a good question. It's Mark Burt, Office of Planning and Zoning. We do have the ability to do that. We can run those scenarios in real time. Using the redistricting software, we can set up the parameters and run those and see how it turns out. And if the results are unfavorable, or put a certain district with too much of a certain population, or puts it over the threshold population that we set, we can go back and readjust those those numbers.
So again, Steve Kai Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer. There may be some merits in that. What I'd like to do is work with Mark and Christina and maybe practice that a bit, because it might speed up. We have done this in other, Mr. Burt and I work together in a different life. This is, I think, possible. It's a little wonky, but at the same time, it may save us an enormous amount of time if we're able to latch on a couple of key places we want to spend more time researching. So we'll practice that, and if we can, maybe our next meeting we take a hack at doing something in real time. It may not work, but maybe it does, and we can look at that in real time and say, wow, let's explore that further for the next meeting.
Sounds like a plan. Great. And I guess when you do run those 2 scenarios, is that something you could also send us, so we actually have a copy in our book so we can see what those look like versus looking at them on the screen? One is just kind of hard to see from up there on the wall, but we can actually see.
Christina Pompa with the Office of Planning and Zoning. The community information I wasn't thinking of running a scenario off of that. It's simply a layer that's going to be data to be considered. The jumping off point I'm recommending is let's start with the simplified plan to get started. Let us get used to working with the software. And Ms. Corby, we're going to need better connections so we can work with the computer better next time. We're like on a stranglehold with our umbilical cord here back to the, so,
Move the whole table back.
yeah, well, we might have to do that next time. So that was really, that simplified plan, coming forward with that, and getting you more data layers.
Okay, I understand. All right, thank you.
Yeah, they can't see that.
All right. Any
I
other?
just wanted to say, I think this is Stephen Waddy. I think that's a great start because we're reviewing kind of what it is now. And I think that, addressing what it looks like right now helps us to be able to identify how to move in the future and whether or not that's what the tweaks are.
Mr. Telfer?
Larry Telfer, question for Mark. If I bring my laptop next time, would you be able to send whatever you're doing on your laptop to ours? Is that possible?
If we are working on any of the web maps or web apps that are available in the portal that we all have access to, yes. If we are working in the Esri Redistricting software, which I'm trying to log into right now just to show you a taste of it, no, it runs on a different Esri platform that we can export from there. We can export shape files, and I could bring them into a web map for you, or for the commission. And we can also produce paper static maps from the redistricting software.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, great. Okay, so Mr. Bird, are you going to try to show us? That's okay. A minute. All right.
I apologize if one too many passwords. Yeah, it makes you log in again. Okay, so this is the, I know it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but when Esri Redistricting opens up, it allows you to open up a plan or start a new plan. So what I'll do is I'll look at this test one that we were looking at earlier today, and I'll open that plan. So what we can see here is that we already have some of the parameters set. We know we want to have, if I can expand this up a little bit, we know we want to have 7 districts within the county. So we have those 7 districts here, and you can see none of the districts have been drawn into the map yet. They're all the census geographies are unassigned. So if we would want to start drawing in, we would go to the Create tab, and we'd pick the district that we want to start drawing. But the interesting thing is we can also bring in other data, and I'm connected to the internet here. So if we would want to see those current districts in the map, and Ms. Pompa had this question earlier today, and I'm not going to be able to bring them in because I'm not networked. My apologies. But you can bring in like the current districts and overlay them on this map so we can draw in those current districts and see how, if we're meeting those target populations or that target percentage of difference. So I can just show you real quick on how, if we do start drawing in a that's I'm zooming in to zoom. So the further you zoom in, the more fine-grained the census geographies become. So there is a hierarchy to how they're drawn, and right now we're looking at block groups. So we'll click on District 1 because we want to assign some assign some to District 1, and we'll zoom in. And we know District 1 roughly starts up in this area. So what I'm going to do is I like to draw using a polygon, and that'll allow me to go start and just start drawing. And every click I am adding a vertex, and then I'll close that off. And so that allowed me to draw District 1 really quick, and we can see for the totals, the population totals, it instantly gave me a population of 19,552, which is still 64,000 and some change off of the population that we wanted to get to for District 1. And I think I set this up with a 10% deviation from that target population. So it does give us that power to go in and draw districts how we see fit and adjust them on the fly. I know this is a quick overview. It's kind of hard to see up on the screen. So maybe we can get in our next meeting, if it's a virtual meeting, we can be able to see this a little bit better. But that's how Esri Redistricting works. We're able to bring in our current districts, draw on what we have, and then base those scenarios if we need to move based on those target populations that we're trying to reach.
Go ahead, Ms. Pompa.
Hi, Mr. Byrd. I'd like to ask you a question. This is Ms. Pompa. So, I'm learning too. The chair brought up the point of using the communities. We could use the community outlines to run some scenarios to see what happens with population and whether we could even get close to some of the targets for each district.
Yeah, Mark Bird again from Office of Planning and Zoning. Yeah, we can definitely bring in any GIS layers that are available to us. They do have to be converted to a shapefile, which is not an issue, and brought into this software package. So any of those communities that we want to look at, we can even filter in based on that community, bring in just that shape of that community.
Just very quick, Steve Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer. So I think what's key is what Mark is saying, is that if there is data, it exists and it's mapped, we can manipulate it. We can draw lines around it. That's what's key. So if we have existing data and it's already been mapped, we can move it around, shift it, draw lines through it, make it one thing, and that's going to help us a great deal in your deliberations.
So then does that mean for the next meeting that you would be able to do that type of an overlay with the districts?
Yes.
You could actually do, okay. And so you could have a scenario for us to look at with the communities of interest and kind of mapped out that way.
Yeah, it's Mark Bird at PZ. Yeah, we can add that into this these scenarios, the current districts, community boundaries, zip codes, if we wanted to bring them in and look at them.
We should also, again, Steve Ziegler, Planning and Zoning Officer, we should create, I'm going to say, nomenclature for all of the scenarios we're running, because we will come back, and so we need to number them, name them in some fashion, because you'll use them multiple times. Like version control in Word.
Yep.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, David Kaufman. For clarification, because I've heard a reference to a next meeting being virtual, were we not in person for the next meeting, or are we virtual? We're here next Monday, right?
Yeah, we're in person here, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, if we're ready to go to other business, we can kind of run through that stuff. But did you have anything else, Mr. Burt, to show us in the mapping system or anything?
I also wanted to show that it does allow you to export your plan as show the distribution, run a compactness test, check the integrity and run reports on it. So we can pull all this out and package it all up and then share it out. So if we would want to attach anything to it, we can publish it out, we can share it out. So there are options to get these plans to the commissioners.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions or comments? So forth? Okay, Great. All right, I guess we have a game plan for the next meeting. We'll have the simple version. Am I not referring to that correctly?
Hi, Christina Pompa. Yes, the simplified plan.
Simplified plan, okay.
And then we'll have the community plan, and we'll probably number them. I think Mr. Kaisigler is correct, because in the end, we could be talking about alternative 17.
Okay.
We'll have a version 1, and there'll be a name to it. Version 2, there'll be a different name to it. So we'll know what we're talking about.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right.
I did have, if
Mr.
we have
Lottie?
other map suggestions in between now and the next meeting, how can we address that?
Well, we discussed our plan moving forward. We would actually have the discussion of the other map iterations at our meetings. So
Okay.
we would have that discussion on the 22nd at our next meeting, and then the Office of Planning and Zoning would then know to run those iterations for the following meeting after that, which would be the 29th.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
That would be an agenda request, correct, directed to you, to the chair, to be added to the agenda. If there was a specific recommendation, we would make a recommendation to add this to the agenda for the discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
So, okay. Okay, everyone ready to move forward? Other business? We're good to go? Okay. All right, so a couple, I guess, really kind of one housekeeping item was I just wanted to really run through our agreed upon meeting dates for the next couple of weeks. I know we have, and these are all in-person meetings here in the council chambers. So right now we're scheduled to meet on Monday, November 22nd, also at 7 o'clock. We have another meeting after that, November 29th, also at 7 o'clock here in the council chambers. We have a meeting December 1st here at 7 p.m. in the council chambers. And then we have our first, we're scheduled to have a public hearing on December 13th. And that would also be here in person in the council chambers. So I know we did discuss having also a virtual public hearing as well, and we didn't narrow down a date for that at the last meeting. I know in further conversations with Ms. Corby, we had conversations about possibly doing something on a Saturday. Understanding after speaking with her, Saturdays are very complicated here because their security staff needs to be brought in. The buildings are not typically open at that time, so it makes it very difficult to have an in-person meeting here in the council chambers. But at the first meeting, we were discussing having one public meeting with people, in person, and then we were going to have a virtual meeting. So maybe it's more talking about an alternate date that we could actually have a virtual meeting for others that aren't able to make it here to Annapolis to an in-person meeting, or they have other scheduling conflicts, or we have a virtual meeting for others to weigh in. So, and I guess I don't really have a date to throw out for that discussion. And looking at it and thinking through it a little more in more detail, I think maybe Saturday morning for a virtual discussion like that may be hard for people, especially I think people that have children. There's sports, there's soccer, baseball, softball, things like that. So that may make it difficult to have something like this on a Saturday morning. So I don't know if maybe we could do another kind of, if anyone has dates they'd like to throw out, or maybe Laura, I can ask you maybe to do another another doodle poll or something, and we can kind of try to identify a date that way. We don't want to have the discussion here this evening.
Tom Fleckenstein, it looks like we don't have anything that week of December 6th through 10. Are there dates that we maybe would set a virtual get-together that particular week? I know we had talked about trying to stay on track, maybe getting together at least once a week, and I don't remember candidly the dates we all threw around. Maybe some schedules have changed, but is there a day that week, Ms. Corby, that we could potentially schedule something?
Yeah, this is Laura Corby. The 6th is not going to be great because that's a council meeting. So let's see. We could make the 7th, we could make the 8th, we could make the 9th, and it looks like even almost the 10th. The only thing that's on the calendar for the end of that week, which I don't think affects you all, but it's flagged for me as the MACA Winter Conference. I don't know if anybody attends that, but Yeah, that's about it. The 6th is not really, can't do that, actually.
I guess I'll throw out, would the 9th work for everyone?
Sure.
Just because I can't do the 6th, 7th, or 8th. I'm being
That's right.
selfish.
Yeah, I mean, are we talking about an evening Zoom?
Yes,
Yeah,
evening
okay.
Zoom.
That would work for me. Does that work for everybody on the 9th?
We discuss in the evening.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and again, we can certainly meet with a quorum, but I'm just out on Thursdays. I teach on Thursday nights.
Okay.
Would this be a public hearing? I'm sorry, or just a regular?
Yeah, it would be a public hearing.
Okay.
Yes. So a virtual public hearing.
Okay.
So December 9th.
I would not be able to do the 9th. However, if a quorum exists, I understand the need to continue on with it.
That would only be 5, though.
Well, that's okay. Then well, if everyone else is available on the 8th, I mean, the 8th, we can,
I'm also not available on the 8th, so.
you're unavailable? Okay.
I mean, I have a monthly meeting that's on that night, so. So again, I think it's fine, and I think we only need, 4? As long as we're capturing the public information, I mean.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura, wasn't the December 16th also discussed, and that was a date that I believe 6 of us could meet? I may have my dates wrong.
I do not remember off the top of my head. I'm not certain that I'm not certain I went that far in the poll that I sent out, but maybe we discussed it, or I'm not entirely certain. The 16th is, it could be open if that is a day that you would like to have a virtual public hearing meeting.
I'm not available 8th through the 11th because, like Lori, I will be in Disney World. So unfortunately, I cannot Zoom from Disney.
Okay.
However, I understand the need to proceed, so.
All right, well, that would explain, though, why we didn't do anything that week, right? Because it really wasn't a good week. Does the 16th work? We could do the public hearing, the 2 public hearings the same week?
That works fine for me. I mean,
I know Thursdays you said are bad.
but we would have 6 for the 16th?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we do that then? So the virtual public hearing on the 16th. Okay, great. And I guess that also gives us a little bit of a buffer if we need more time to discuss districts and put a proposal out there for the public. We have a little more time to do that too. And then we're public hearing that week. Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I request, David Kaufman, Laura, is it possible that the event invitations for all of these calendar events could go out to us? I find that when there's organizational calendar invites, if there's ever a change, then it always gets uniformly changed rather than one.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
I think I've gotten as far as this week with sending out the Google invite meetings, and I am putting notations now that say in-person or virtual. So I do need to still do that, and I will do that. And then when I set up the Zoom meeting, it will be that 2 email process. Once again, I have no way of combining those, I'm afraid. So you'll get the invite, but then your join link will be a different email.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. And Ashley, you have another?
I do have one other question or suggestion, and I don't know how this falls in with the Open Meetings Act, but given the fact that it's really hard to see the screen over there, if we were to bring our laptops, would it be possible for you to open a Zoom and screen share with us? And that way we would be able to have the numbers live right in front of us and be able to see that?
This is Mark Burt from Office of Planning and Zoning. Yes, that would be a possibility if it does not interfere with any Open Meetings Act or anything like that.
Excellent.
Okay, great. Good suggestion.
We can talk about that. I was wondering if everybody was able to bring some kind of a laptop, if there was some way to do some kind of like a share view or something like that. So if it would be okay with the commission, I can work with OPZ and our OIT folks to try and come up with a solution here. I do apologize for the screen. This is because we're sort of flux right now with technology.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we have that done. All right, so the other item under new business, new business, Ms. Corby, she sent all of us a link to the public comment page that she was going to put out on the website, and I'm hoping everyone had a chance to take a look at that. it looked fine to me, generally. Did anyone have any other questions or suggestions for the form to get public input? All right, if not, all right, I guess we're good to go then on that.
So just so I can be clear too, you're okay with the 3 sort of options? So it would be sort of like general feedback, and then they'll be specific on redistricting and then charter. Okay.
Yes.
And the form that I sent you that may look a little different when we get it on the website, but it'll generally be the same information.
Okay, great. Okay, so then when will that go live, Laura? Do you-
Hopefully tomorrow.
great.
Our content management system that the county uses actually was down today, so we did have some trouble posting stuff on the website today. Hoping that they got that fixed, but we can do it tomorrow.
Okay, great. And then how will that be publicized for members of the public?
So there'll be, if anyone's had a moment to check out on the county's website, AA County, and then you navigate to the council webpage, and then in there's actually a page for your commission. I've been posting agendas and things there. Anna's been helping to get agendas and minutes posted. There is some information up there. Some of these reports that you got this evening, I'm going to get posted there once again as soon as the web team is back up and running. So I will put that, it's probably embedded on a page as well. So we can give you a link to the form. You can have people go to the page if they want to be able to check out everything and see the form as well. But anyway, I'll be able to get you some kind of a web address, and you can share it far and wide.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, great. Is that something that council members will also share so their constituents will know? They can provide comment and feedback?
It'll be a public tool. Yeah, it'll be on the public aacounty.org. So yes, no holds barred. Everybody can access it. No rules. Everybody can complete the form.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, David Kaufman. Is there any way that can be a banner on the homepage?
That's a good question. We do lots of banners. We have a couple up right now, in fact. So I will work with.
I'm looking at the page.
Okay.
And I just the issue is always there's a difference between it's accessible and it's readily known and available. So
Yeah.
I mean, as deep as our page goes, it's going to be folks who would casually stroll across the website that may be inspired. But again, I understand you have to control the volume of information.
A banner, or if you go to the home page for the county council, you'll see like boxes in the center there. We call those spotlights.
And there's a lot to manage. As a lay citizen, if I'm thinking about redistricting, I'm not going to intuitively think about the council. It's going to be a county issue, not a process of government issue. So I just, however we can make sure that we're creating as, an ease of view and in social media, whatever opportunities we've got to spread the word that we're seeking and we want the input, because the last thing that we need is for this to be something that people perceive as concealed.
We will give you some kind of a version that you can use on Facebook that will help you out with that. We'll do a press release as well. We have our assistant administrative officer who does that for us. So we'll do everything we can to get the word out. We'll look at adding another banner and all that good stuff. Definitely, this is very important stuff and high priority. So it'll be treated as such.
Okay, great.
Stephen Waddy. In terms of updating maps, once we can update this comment form later to include if people want to submit maps of their own or.
So yes, that is what I'm working with the web team right now, to have that capability to upload something. The form I think I created, it has the last field says if you want to send an attachment, and it gives an email address. That's not really the most efficient or even inviting way to do things. So what I'd like to do is create a form. And again, if you go to the council's webpage where we have our testimony tools, that tool actually does allow you to upload something. So that's kind of what I'm going towards.
All right.
And hopefully that'll work.
Will we be able to receive, on our end, are we receiving, immediately the responses, or is it
So I think what was decided, I'm not certain how this was decided, but it's in my notes, that I'm going to give you probably some kind of weekly report that lists everything in some kind of spreadsheet or something that is easy for you all to receive and take a look at, if that would work. We did talk about setting it up so you could get emails, but if there were 100 submissions in 1 week, all of your inboxes would be getting 100 emails. So I think that maybe I can help you with that by keeping it organized and giving you weekly reports.
That was exactly my thought. I appreciate that.
Okay.
My Gmail is at 98% right now.
I've done it both ways during the pandemic, so I can tell you what makes life easy and what doesn't.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. All right, any other items under other business? Okay, seeing none, seeing heads shaking. Okay. All right, I guess that then concludes our meeting for this evening. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Okay, Mr. Kaufman, a second?
Second.
Mr. Fleckenstein, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, see you guys on Monday, 22nd. All right. Turn